Welcome to the series lecture by International Federation of Rural Surgeons for rural surgery. Today we're going to talk about the summary of the lecture about managing liver abscess in rural areas. This will be presented by Dr. Royson from Adivasi or Tribal Hospital in Gudalur in South India. Over to Dr. Royson.
Thank you so much, sir. Greetings to everyone, and greetings from Gudalur Adivasi Hospital. So today we'll be talking about the management of liver abscess in the rural surgical setting. So just a background on this condition, liver abscess has always been a surgical problem or a surgical emergency rather, but much has evolved over the last few centuries, I would say, in the management, where liver abscess is more and more commonly being managed by interventional radiologists these days. But not much has changed in rural surgical scenario because it is in the hands of a surgeon to make the diagnosis and to manage and also follow up the patient adequately. So rural surgery, although is a very old disease described from the time of Hippocrates, is still a disease which is surprising young surgeons with its varied manifestations, clinical features, and complications. So the frequency of the condition itself depends on the etiology. So as we all know, there is bacterial or the pyogenic causes and the amoebic causes. So both of them have different manifestations, and the management also is slightly different. But what is significant is the morbidity that is that occurs due to the complications of liver abscess. So the etiology here has been described from the biliary, prominently the cause for a long time, secondary to gallstone diseases, cholangitis, or biliary tract malignancies, and also some worm infestations. However, now there has been more emphasis on cryptogenic liver abscess, where the cause really is not determined. So it can vary from infections of the gut, like appendicitis or ischemic colitis or bacterial infectious colitis, which can the infectious agents can migrate or be transferred to the liver through the portal route or even through the circulation, and also sometimes the hematogenous route with via the hepatic artery if there is systemic sepsis that can again disseminate into the liver. Similarly, there could be direct extension from infections of the lung, infection of the gallbladder, infections around that area, or even the subhepatic abscess. And sometimes even direct trauma, the sequelae of trauma can lead to liver abscess. So as we all know, there are two important causes, the bacterial causes and the amoebic causes for liver abscess. So it's a very simple way to differentiate between the two, and it's very important to differentiate between the two while evaluating, especially for rural surgeons where we may not have facilities like serology for entamoeba, smear, or even advanced radiological facilities. So history taking becomes a very important thing. So in bacterial infections due to bacteria, the pyogenic abscess occurs generally in the older individuals who are immunocompromised, maybe with diabetes mellitus or general malnutrition, immunosuppressed states due to malignancies, etc. Whereas amoebic abscess is generally seen in young individuals. There is significant gender difference also between the conditions, where the pyogenic abscess is almost equal in males and females, whereas in amoebic abscess, the males have 10 times more preponderance than females. The presentation is generally acute in pyogenic abscess, whereas it's chronic in amoebic abscess. And location is also another important thing. Generally, both these etiologies target the right lobe of the liver, whereas the pyogenic abscess can have both right and left lobe, and also there could be multiple abscesses, like you can see in this figure. The one on top is an amoebic abscess, which is like generally a solitary large abscess involving the right lobe, whereas the pyogenic abscesses can be multiple small or large abscesses involving either of the lobes. And many a times a patient can have a mixture of both these conditions. So it could start off with the amoebic abscess, but there could be a super infection of bacterial agents and causing mixed infections. So which is why when the treatment is initiated, both bacterial and amoebic etiology is targeted. So about 30% of the patients with amoebic abscess can have GI symptoms like chronic diarrhea and other abdominal discomfort, but it's only in 30% of the patients, which is important to remember. The clinical features can again vary. There is a very huge spectrum of clinical features depending on the location of the abscess, size of the abscess, and general condition of the patient. So patient can just come with vague upper abdominal discomfort, and on evaluation may be diagnosed with an abscess. On the other extreme, the patient can come with features of frank peritonitis if there is a ruptured abscess. So generally, they'll have fever with chills with right upper abdominal pain. There can also be jaundice, weight loss, nausea, and vomiting. And on examination, if there is obstruction of the biliary tree, there could be icterus. And on abdominal examination, there could be tenderness in the right hypochondrium. If there is a rupture of the abscess into the peritoneal cavity, there will be guarding rigidity and rebound tenderness, etc. And it could also cause ipsilateral pleural effusion. So evaluation, this is again for rural surgeons with what minimal investigations we can diagnose. So the blood picture may give rise, may show some amount of leukocytosis, especially in case of pyogenic abscess, where there will be elevated count with left shift. And liver functions may be deranged or may be also normal, which is also important for us to remember. Serology, if there is facilities available, again, it's a serum marker for determining the entamoeba parasitic infection on serology. Coming to imaging, X-rays are very non-specific. So apart from some elevation in the hemidiaphragm and sometimes gas in the abscess cavity, we may not get much information. But if a patient comes with peritonitis and we are suspecting hollow viscous perforation, it's important to do an X-ray. And if there is no air under diaphragm, if on clinical examination, if there is guarding and tenderness on the right hypochondrium, we can suspect a ruptured liver abscess in such a patient. Ultrasound, however, is a very important clinical tool, especially for rural surgeons, which has an accuracy of about 80 to 90%. So we can see the location of the abscess, the number of abscesses, which lobe is involved. We can even see if there is a features of rupture or if there is a biliary radical dilatation or obstruction. So ultrasound is a very important tool for all of us to know. Yes, so if the facilities for CT scan is available, it is also another important tool, especially if there is any discrepancy between ultrasound and clinical examination. Another modality of intervention for diagnosis and treatment is aspiration. So this can be done under ultrasound guidance. And sometimes if there is a rupture of liver abscess into the abdominal wall presenting as subcutaneous swelling, even without ultrasound guidance, we can aspirate to confirm the presence of pus. So here the presence of characteristic anchovy sauce pus, which is again typical of amoebic liver abscess, becomes important when we aspirate. And if it's just foul smelling other frank pus, we can even do gram staining and culture of the pus to initiate appropriate antibiotics. So the cornerstone in the management of liver abscess is antibiotics and drainage of the abscess. So both of them are very important, but antibiotics definitely in all the patients. Whether abscess needs to be drained or not depends on some other conditions. So like I mentioned earlier, there has been a lot of evolution in the surgical management. Historically, laparotomy and drainage of the abscess was the treatment of choice for liver abscess. But now with newer modalities, after a few years, there was laparoscopic drainage, which was described. But both these procedures, especially laparotomy, has a significant morbidity and also mortality because of the procedure itself, which is why now we are doing lesser invasive procedures like percutaneous drainage, either aspiration or placement of drain with or without ultrasound or CT guidance. So that's been the evolution of management. So there is no doubt that the patient will require an exploratory laparotomy in case of peritonitis, because in case there is if there is a rupture of abscess into the peritoneum, the patient will need a lavage, thorough lavage, and control of infection. So there is definitely a need for laparotomy in such a case. But if the patient does not have features of peritonitis and there is no rupture on imaging, this can be managed with image-guided localization and drainage. So coming to the rural scenario, how can we go about incorporating all these recent advances in the rural scenario? A lot of factors play a role in this. One is the general condition of the patient. If the patient is stable or if the patient is in sepsis, which is an important thing. The size of the abscess. Smaller abscesses can be managed without drainage with just antibiotics, and we can follow up, whereas larger abscesses will require some form of drainage. The location of the abscess is another important thing. If it's a subcapsular abscess in the liver, the drainage by aspiration becomes easier, whereas the deep-seated abscesses can be a little challenging. The number of abscesses also is an important parameter. Sometimes with multiple abscesses which are small in size, a trial of antibiotics can be tried, and then the patient can be followed up. Another important thing is feasibility of draining these abscesses. Is ultrasound guidance available? And if at all ultrasound is a difficult modality, can CT be considered? CT scan, even if the abscess cannot be drained by CT guidance, at least a preliminary CT scan can give us a better picture of where exactly the abscess is. And further, the abscess can be drained by using an ultrasound guidance. And lastly, definitely open drainage in some certain specific scenarios. So it's a stepwise approach. Firstly, you have to localize where exactly the abscess is, where the ultrasound becomes an important tool. With the ultrasound guidance, it's better to aspirate from the lesion to see what is the kind of if you are able to access the entire if you are able to aspirate the entire abscess cavity, then the patient will not really need any drain placement and can be followed up at a later date. So the aspiration can be a confirmatory thing to see that it's an infection, and also a therapeutic thing by aspirating the entire lesion. So coming to the surgical management, so sometimes the patient can have a rupture of the liver abscess into the anterior abdominal wall. So in this case, first it is important to mark the site of the surgical incision by an ultrasound guided, if you have an ultrasound to localize the abscess and pre-mark the area of surgical incision. And the incision can, depending on the size of the abscess and where it's ruptured into the anterior abdominal wall, the skin incision length can vary. So once the skin incision is made, the layers of the abdominal wall are open, and the abscess cavity is delineated and it's open. It can either be by blunt dissection, finger dissection, or even with an instrument. So once the abscess cavity is open, we have to evacuate the pus, which we can use a suction at this point, and even irrigate normal saline to drain out the pus. So following this, we need to place a drain. So many a times in rural surgical centers, we may not have a pigtail drain. We may not have even the ADK or Malikot's catheter. So we have used Foley's catheter, and it works just fine. Probably a 16 or 18 French Foley catheter, and place it into the abscess cavity, secure it to the anterior abdominal wall, and connect it to the urosac. So finally, after all these placements of the drain and wound wash, we can close the wound with widely placed sutures. And it's desirable to leave the drain at least for a couple of weeks until we can do an ultrasound again to see that the abscess has resolved in size and the patient is systemically better. So on follow-up, it's another important thing is to give a course of metronidazole for the patients. Generally, about 7 to 10 days is what's recommended. So the antibiotics and anti-protozoal, anti-amoebic agents should be initiated just right before the procedure, at the time of diagnosis. Whenever we make the diagnosis of liver abscess, we should initiate antibiotics. For pyogenic abscesses, it has to be a broad spectrum type of antibiotic, depending on, again, the patient's systemic condition, as well as metronidazole. Total of about 4 weeks of broad spectrum antibiotic and 2 weeks of metronidazole. So that will be the treatment of liver abscess in for rural surgeons. Thank you very much.
So you mentioned that the smaller size, you would give medical treatment. What is the size? Because many of the rural surgeons will want to know exact size.
Yeah, up to 2 centimeters.
I thought 3. Anyway, 2 or 3 centimeters is fine. And the other thing I wanted to know is, my experience has been that you can give a much better peritoneal wash if you have the facilities for laparoscopy, because you can turn the patient in upside down, right side up, and so on, and give a much better wash. And through one of the port sites, you can leave a drain. And one more method that we have been using, if you're using an ultrasound guided aspiration is that you pass a guide wire through the thick needle that you're using for aspiration. And you can use the PCNL dilators to dilate the track and leave a NG tube. Sometimes even if you dilate up to 14 French, that should suffice. It drains quite well. And obviously we need to leave the drain till it stops draining and track forms, which takes about at least a month. Thank you then, and then looking forward to the full lecture later.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.